you talked about, obviously growing in your art of coaching, are there any core principles or anything that you've learned over the, years, like that you really stuck with you and you really take with you every job you go, like kind of your core structures or core principles that you have?
Um, so the biggest thing I've kind of already talked about, but just like hard work and discipline, those are two things that are going to stick with me for the rest of my life because that's what got me to the point where I'm now. Um, so I mean, growing up, all I knew was hard work. That's how I excelled in athletics, and that's basically my core principle as a strength coach is that I may not be the best strength coach, or I may not be, the best at whatever topic that this coach wants me to talk about or wants me to present to the team or whatever the case may be. But I'm going to work really, really hard to make sure that if I don't know something, I'm going to learn it.
What's going on, Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners? On today's episode, we have Nick Raszeja, assistant strength coach for Syracuse, my hometown, Syracuse University Orangemen football. Nick, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Excited to do this.
I'm stoked about it. I've heard your name obviously for years. For our listeners, this is we were talking about it a little bit pre-show, right? We call it like co-parenting, maybe. I'm the one who named that term. Okay. Of Patrick Brooks, who's crushing it down there, former guest on the show, now the assistant strength coach assistant strength coach with Arkansas State, working with women's basketball. So he's always kind of told me about you. So I'm excited to get connected with you and learn a little bit more.
Yeah, no doubt. It's crazy how this whole process works out, this whole field works out, and how small it is. And I'm awesome. Patrick came and worked for you, and I love Patrick. He's a good dude, and it's just fun to see how it all works out in the end.
It's awesome, man. Seriously, like you said, like everything's way more connected than you think it is. And so I'm glad that we could finally get connected and officially meet each other. So with that being said, can you kind of just give me a background of your career, different experiences with the strength and conditioning, where you've been, and then what's led you to Syracuse?
Yeah, for sure. So to be honest, I never knew strength coaching was a thing. It's never something that I ever really truly thought about when I was growing up or knew about. So like most people, I would say growing up, I had aspirations to play professional football. And I thought that was going to happen, and there's no way that it possibly couldn't happen. So growing up, I pretty much played every sport I could. My dad actually, he coached me in soccer when I was real little. Played soccer until about fourth grade, and fourth grade was actually when I started playing football, and I was actually allowed to have pads on in fourth grade. And so I started my football journey there. Um, Now, when I was there, I was not a good athlete whatsoever. The league kind of had a rule at that point where everyone on the team had to play a minimum of 8 plays, but they did not have to play any more than that if the coach didn't feel like they needed to. So my first 2 years of playing football, I was that guy where I only played the minimum 8 plays a game. I actually started as like an offensive lineman. I'm not a very big guy right now. I'm 5'9", 200 pounds. Obviously much smaller back then. But yeah, so I wasn't a very good football player when I started. Actually switched leagues, became a really good football player at a young age in this other league, which I guess the talent level is probably a little bit less, but kind of built my confidence a little bit as a football player. And obviously that carried on, through middle school and through high school. So I played football for starting from fourth grade. I started playing basketball in the seventh grade just because my friends were doing it on the side. So I was kind of always involved around with athletics. Um, and I really didn't know, what I wanted to do in terms of, how I was going to make it to the next level, essentially. High school came rolling around, and I started lifting for the first time in eighth grade. I was a smaller guy. I didn't really have any experience, with lifting or, doing any kind of training before this. My middle school coach at the time actually kind of pulled me to the side, and I started working with him a few times a week, just the very basic introductory things in the weight room, teach me how to bench, teach me how to squat, all the, the fundamentals of strength and conditioning. Started that in eighth grade. And honestly, I fell in love with that right away. Um, Eventually, obviously led me into my first high school off season. In high school, I played all 4 years of high school sports, loved the weight room, loved training. I loved the conditioning aspect part of it because to me, I thought that was always going to be how I was going to make it. I was just going to outwork everybody. And I knew I wasn't the greatest athlete, but I didn't think that really mattered at the time. I thought I was just going to outwork everybody, outtrain everyone. And then naturally, that's just going to, carry me over to be an NFL football player is what I truly thought at the time. So, I played, like I said, I played high school football for 4 years. I actually started playing basketball my freshman year of high school as well, just for fun. I had some guys on the team. I wanted to stay active, so I did that. Actually, ended up my last game of my sophomore year of football, heading right into basketball season. I actually broke my collarbone, so I kind of missed that following year basketball season. Kind of stopped doing that, and then took basically the rest of that winter, spring off going into my junior year. My football coach at the time, after my junior year season, he wanted me to get faster. So that's when I got introduced to track. I did it as something just, to get faster as a hobby to stay in shape, not necessarily something that I was going to truly compete at and do well at, but maybe it'll give me the little bit of edge I needed to become a little bit faster, which will help me as a football player, and then ultimately, hopefully get recruited. But so I did that during the spring of my junior year, going to my senior year of high school. I really wasn't getting recruited. I didn't really understand the whole recruiting process and how it worked. I've been talking to a bunch of small schools, Division II schools, Division III schools. Um, like I said, I didn't really know how the whole process worked, but ended up choosing to go to LaGrange College. LaGrange College is a Division III school down in Georgia. I knew if I went down there, I'd have the opportunity, to play right away and play early, which that's truly something that I was looking for in a school. And kind of like what I said earlier, I just thought that it didn't really matter where I went or how big I was or what my athletic ability was. I was just gonna work until I made it to the pros. Um, so I ended up going down there, and then after about 2 years, reality kind of truly set in for me. At that point, I'm like, okay, I'm 5'9", I'm 185, 195 pounds. Um, I'm not going to play professional football. It's just not in the cards. And so, what's next? Um, I knew that I wanted to coach. I love football. Even at the time, obviously in college, I was training really hard. I fell in love with the weight room there. I had a few different strength coaches, um, but I never saw that as something that I didn't really think of it as a job because, especially with Division III athletics, if you're not familiar with them, the strength coaches there also worked as a position coach. So I just thought it was something you kind of do on the side, and I didn't really realize that this could ultimately become a profession. Um, so my head coach, it was actually after my junior year of college football. His name is Matt Mummy. At the time, it was Matt Mummy. Um, he knew that I wanted to get into coaching. So basically, he said, "Hey, stick it out for 2 more years. Obviously, play at the highest level you can play. If nothing works out, I want you to come back and potentially be a graduate assistant for me as a football coach." So I was like, "Okay, cool. That's awesome." During school, I did study exercise science, and that was just because I didn't want to necessarily learn anything else. It had the word exercise in it, and so I'm like, all right, cool. I'm gonna go to school. I'm gonna learn about the body. I'm gonna learn different exercise, but I don't really. School wasn't necessarily my thing. I was always good at it. I made good grades. I graduated with, above 3.0, but it was just never my thing. So chose this major exercise science. I did that, and then like I said, my junior year, I got potentially offered the chance to come back and coach a position, as a graduate assistant. So, kind of long story short, I finished my senior year playing football in the fall, and in January of basically my spring semester of my senior year, so I had one more semester. There was kind of a switch in the program of how we were going to train. The strength coach at the time left, took a different job, and the exercise science department at LaGrange was actually asked to take over the football training for that off season. And since at that time I knew I was getting ready to be GA, um, coach asked me if I would go do basically an internship with them and be around the weight room, and just kind of learn from them. And, that'll kind of naturally transition me potentially into this GA position. So I worked with them, for about 3 or 4 weeks. Long story short, the way they train, looking back on it, to me, it was really good training, but the kind of the mindset and the attitude and just kind of the way they went about things wasn't traditional in terms of what football coaches want to see in a weight room. Um, so there's a few disagreements. Long story short, that exercise department ended up not working with football anymore. And so being a Division III school, you don't just make a phone call and the new strength coach comes in and you're just rolling and everything is good. We didn't necessarily have anybody. So since I was already doing an internship with them, our coach was like, "Hey, you got the team, train the team." And I'm like, I was kind of thrown off at that point. It was actually myself and one of my former college roommates at the time. His name is Davis Conley. He actually ended up becoming a head strength coach. He's actually not in the profession anymore. But me and him, we were in the weight room and our head coach was like, "Okay, cool. You guys essentially run the team, program for him. Let's see what you got." And I did the best I could at that time. I had no idea what I was truly doing. Watch a bunch of videos on YouTube and, from past experiences from my strength coaches that I previously had at LaGrange. I'm like, all right, this is what we're going to do. And so me and him kind of led the program and we led the rest of the off season, which it was kind of a, crazy thing looking back at it because Monday through Friday, I was still a college student. I was still, we were training the team Monday through Friday. And then Friday night, Saturday, I was going to go hang out with the team on whatever local bar we were at because they're still all my friends. Then here comes Monday rolling back around. And all right, 6 a.m. back in the weight room, yelling and screaming and cussing them out. I'm like, no, it was definitely a pretty wild experience. But as I was doing this whole process, I still don't want to be a strength coach. It's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a football coach. So I officially got the offer to be a GA after that semester. And my role as a GA was to be the defensive back coach. And then I would also be the head strength coach. So essentially, I just kind of did it. I did the head strength coaching part on the side because I wanted to be a football coach. So for 2 years, I did that. I learned a ton in the process. Um, it was definitely something that if I could go back on, I would do a ton of different things differently in terms of my coaching philosophy and the X's and O's of the actual program that I was writing. Because essentially, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just kind of taking what I learned in school at the time and keeping it really basic and just trying to train these guys to the best of my ability. So during the first year of my GI, I was definitely focused on being a football coach, and the strength coaching thing was kind of a secondhand thought. But as I kept learning and going on and growing, I kind of spent a lot more of my time researching the weight room, and I found more of my leisure time. I was into books. I was listening to different podcasts. I was on YouTube at the time, and I was watching the Scott Cochran videos and Paul Jackson videos and Jeff Dillman videos and all these cool videos that were these high level strength coaches were putting out at this time. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to try to replicate what they do, put in my own twist, and make that my weight room. So I did that. Finished out my 2 years as a GA, and at that point, I'm like, okay, you know what? I think I want to give this whole strength coaching thing a try. So toward the end, I applied to not necessarily applied. I reached out to every single Division I school, FCS school, Division II school, and just like, hey, this is who I am. This is my experience. I'm certified at this point. Do you have any kind of assistant role, part-time role, even another potential GA position? Anything that I could do to get some kind of employment at this point, because I was kind of struggling to find a job. Um, didn't really hear back from anyone besides schools that were looking for at the time summer interns. And I did not necessarily want to do that, but I knew I couldn't stay at LaGrange. My time there was done. I couldn't find any full-time work. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is something that I should try to take on. So I ended up going to the University of South Carolina the summer of 2018 under Coach Jeff Dillman, who, like I said, I kind of watched a lot of his YouTube videos in the last year or so, kind of trying to learn from him. Um, and so I spent the summer down there and learned a ton. There's a lot of really good strength coaches on staff at that time. Belrose was on that staff, Corey Miller, John Griffin, Chase Dodd, all these guys who are either now in the professional level or at high level college football still. So I had great mentors at the time that I truly didn't realize and truly probably didn't appreciate as much as I should have when I was there. But I spent the summer there, learned a ton from them. Um, around early August. So LaGrange actually hasn't started playing football yet. There was a head coaching switch there. Defensive coordinator who I worked under actually got promoted to the head coach. He called me up and was like, "Hey, I know you don't necessarily probably want to come back here, but I need a defensive coordinator and I need a head strength coach." So I'm like, "All right." I just spent basically the last year or so deciding that I wasn't going to become a football coach anymore, even though I enjoyed it. I love coaching on the field. I hated the film and I hated the recruiting that kind of came along with football coach, which that's kind of what ultimately led me to become a strength coach. But when he called me back and was like, "Hey, listen, I need a defensive coordinator. I need a head strength coach. You're not making any money. I have some money to offer you. It's not much, but would you be willing to do this?" And I had to do it. I had to say yes. So drove back down to Georgia, um, became the defensive coordinator, became the head strength coach at LaGrange. So I was definitely wearing the dual hats there. Once again, I loved coaching football. I loved calling plays. That was an unbelievable experience. But kind of like similar pattern toward the end of my graduate assistantship. I didn't really care about the on-field football. I just wanted to learn as much as I could about the weight room. So I spent it was about 2.5 years at LaGrange doing both. I'm like, okay, like I can't do this to myself anymore. I want to go pursue what I actually want to pursue long term. And so I started reaching out again. Ended up getting a job at Tennessee State University under head strength coach Tyler Miles. He was actually most recently, Florida's head football strength coach the last couple of years. So he gave me a chance. Went up there. I worked with women's basketball. I worked with softball, and then I assisted with football. I did that for about 7 months. Um, During that was 2020, so that was like the heart of COVID, and we had all that going on. Um, we ended up playing our football season in the spring of that year, 2021. So everything was kind of crazy at the time. Um, Head coach. He got removed from football. Tennessee State actually hired Eddie George to come in to be their new football coach at the time. We got pushed out of football. And basically, what happened was I got turned over to every Olympic sport at that time. Tyler, he ended up leaving. He went somewhere else. So I had every Olympic team at that point. So men's basketball, women's basketball, volleyball. I was kind of handling all that. Did that for about the next 3 or 4 months. But I knew the Olympic side wasn't necessarily for me. I loved coaching women's basketball. I loved working with softball, but ultimately I'm a football guy. I wanted to be around football. And so as long as I had that football um, itch and I could kind of handle it at TSU and still do both, I was completely cool with doing all that. But once I lost that football side of me, I knew that I wanted to get back to football. Um, and so the timeline now, this is around August of 2021. So I spent about a year at Tennessee State. I've been in contact with his name is Coach Chris Laskowski. He was the head strength coach at Charlotte. I had kind of communicated with him for the last 3 or 4 years, just kind of reaching out to him, asking questions, getting to know him a little bit. Actually reached out to him and I was like, "Hey, this is my current situation. Do you have anything going on? Even if it's a possible internship, I might end up, because my parents are I grew up in Charlotte or right below Charlotte in Fort Mill, South Carolina. So my parents are from that area. I reached out to them. I'm like, "Hey, listen, I may end up coming back and living in this area for a while. Do you even have a possible internship that I could do?" Um, and he reached out to me right away. He's like, "Hey, actually, one of my assistants just left. He took another job. I'm looking to hire someone else. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Absolutely." Ended up flying down on a plane, interviewed in person with him for about 2 days, got hired. And so then, my career at UNC Charlotte kind of got off and rolling from there. Spent 2 years working under him. Um, at the time, after that second year, we did not have a very successful season. Head coach at the time ended up getting fired. Whole staff gets fired. Strength staff gets fired. And then the new coach gets hired, Biff Poggi, which he is a very interesting man. He was a very awesome guy to work for as well. Definitely in his own kind of way. But he brought in a guy named Louis Corallo, which I'm sure a lot of people are very familiar with. I of course knew who he was. I had never talked to him before. I had never met him before. Didn't know, who he was. or I know who he was, but I didn't know, we never spoke before. And so the DFO at the time, he actually reached out to me. I was like, hey, someone needs to go pick up this Lewis Crawler guy from the airport when he was first arriving into town. And I was like, you know what? I'll go do it. I'll go pick him up and, maybe get to know him a little bit. So went and picked him up from the airport, had our first conversation. And then luckily from there, he saw something in me. He kept me on staff. So I was able to work with him for a year at Charlotte. Um, which is kind of what led me to Syracuse. So his best friend is Coach Chad Smith, who is the director of football performance here at Syracuse. And at the time, I was at Charlotte. I was actually working out in the weight room. Um, Coach Chad just got the Syracuse job. He called Coach Lou and was like, "Hey, I'm looking for this kind of person." Um, at Syracuse, or as of right now, we use a StatSport GPS system. That's what we use at Charlotte. Under Coach Lou, I took over running the GPS for him. So he called Coach Lou, like, hey, I need a guy who knows how to operate stat sport. This kind of strength coach. Do you have anybody? And basically, Coach Lou opened his office doors, like, hey, Nick, you want to work at Syracuse? And I was like, yes, hell yeah, I do. Got the phone, talked to Coach Chad Smith right there. And that was my first interaction with him. And, one thing led to another, and ended up getting a job here. And, now I've been at Syracuse for the last 3 years now.
Dude, let's go, man. What an awesome story, and what a unique story too,
Hmm.
because it's always, you hear a lot of times within football, the coaches will start out as a position coach and then work within strength and conditioning, and then ultimately decide on strength and conditioning or, position coaching and sticking with football. But to hear you having to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then ultimately making your decision for strength and conditioning is so cool. I mean, it's something where it gives you an inside perspective, right? You've been a defensive coordinator now. You're obviously a lot of players, or a lot of strength coaches used to be former players, but actually running the show and having to call plays and do that stuff is a little bit different than just playing it, I'm sure. So it's cool to hear that you ultimately kind of went back and forth, and I'm glad that you picked strength and conditioning. I mean, I just love to hear how it all worked out. We have very similar stories. Like, I remember very much feeling the same, right? There's no way I'm not going to go to the NFL. Like, I'm going to be probably second round draft pick. I'll be okay with it, like
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And
I
then
can live with
I'll
that.
settle, 100%. And then I remember there were just like different events that just kind of happened where I remember I was really good at wrestling in ninth grade. And then all of a sudden I started wrestling people who were technically good and not just people who I could outmuscle. And I started losing there. And then I remember within football, like I was really good at, hitting people and being powerful and doing those things. And then as soon as I started having to pass cover and do all the things that actually matter within football, I really started to suck. And they started pulling me a little bit more and more as we kind of got further along in my career. And I remember kind of coming to the same realization, like, hey, this may not end up being for me. But the mentality was the same, right? It's like, I'm just going to
Hmm.
outwork everybody to get there. That's how I'm going to find my success. And I actually even remember reading a book. It was like a kid's book. I can't remember what the author's name was, but it's like, basically it was a dad talking to his son about football when he first got to college. And it was like, yeah, you're fifth on the depth chart right now. All you got to do is outwork the fourth. And then all you got to do is
Hmm.
outwork the third, and then the second and the first. And then also, all of this different type of stuff. And I remember being like, hell yeah, that's going to be me. And then I slowly figured out, obviously, it wasn't even going to be me. I didn't even make it to the college level like you did. But, that mentality of I'm just going to outwork everybody, I think really takes you far. And to me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, right? But to me, it's almost why you prefer the strength and conditioning aspect a little bit, right? Because you can take that energy and refocus it into, okay, these are the people who have the natural talent to do it. And I can teach them to work hard and I can teach them to outwork everybody. And they're the ones who can make it to the next level. Does that ring true for you at all? Does that sound like something that's right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, like with my personal experience, and like I knew I was only going to get so fast. So speed necessarily was my thing, but the weight room, I knew that, and I truly believe that anyone can get as strong as they possibly want to, as long as they work hard. And now that I'm, became a strength coach, I try to just instill that motto that, listen, you have all the tools in the world. If you can just work really hard and you can build muscle and you can do these certain things, you can reach levels that is high, as you could potentially, have in your life. So yeah, I definitely try to take, what I tried to do and just instill those values and those ideas into the players so that now that they have the tools, they can, they can take it as far as they possibly can.
Yeah, we've got a running joke from high school, actually, where we called it hoop dreams. And I was like, hey, like maybe I could just, football's not going to work out. Maybe I can just work so hard at basketball that, I can be a walk on and, and then maybe I'll get it in the game my senior year, or something like
Right.
that. And so it was like kind of a running joke, but I brought it to basketball now, obviously working with basketball. So we call it like hoop dreams, but the guys who I work with actually have the talent to be able to go do those things, right? And we were talking pre-show. One of our, bigs just committed to Syracuse, and it's obviously a very high-level program that he's committed to, and he has a chance to go pro. And so it's so cool to be able to instill that mentality into people who have the skills to do it, right?
For
Instead of
sure.
just kind of chasing something that might not work out for myself or for you,
Yep.
but you watch these people develop and you watch them go pro, and it's like the most exciting thing in the world. I love it.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you mentioned, obviously your head strength coach pretty much your junior and senior year, right? And or was
Yeah.
that
So
just senior?
the spring semester of my senior year of
Okay.
college,
Yep.
that was my, I guess, first experience being a head strength coach, if you want to call it that. Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, it's drinking water through a fire hose, I'm sure, and just trying to figure out, how to do the basic things. And you talked about having a unique relationship where, yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine like you're going out to have beers with the guys, and then on Monday morning you're going back and training them and got to hold them
Yeah.
accountable and do all these
hmm
things. Like, I'm curious, from that experience, your first time running the weight room to now, how do you feel like you've grown as a coach? What are the main areas you feel like you've gotten better and really grown in?
I think the biggest area I've gotten better is just the art of coaching. Um, I didn't really know how to coach or what I was coaching or what to look for as a coach. So just being, around the athletes I've been doing this now. This is going on year 10, with some form of coaching. So just getting the experience and being on the floor and just coaching all different kinds of athletes from all different backgrounds. That's one thing that I've just gotten better at the art of coaching, because every kid learns differently. Um, and in order to reach everyone, because that's our goal is ultimately to reach every kid. So if that's, a more hands-on coaching approach or a more verbal coaching approach, that's just something that I've definitely gotten better with over my career.
No doubt. And that's why I love doing this podcast, right? Because we don't really talk about sets and reps a lot. We talk about, kind of more of the art of coaching and the soft skills side, which is exciting to me. And that's why I like coaching. One thing, this is just kind of a selfish personal question. I've always been curious about it, right? Because I worked with the football staff for a while. I was a, intern slash GA, whatever you want to call it. But then ultimately moved to Olympic sports. And then the setup within basketball is, you might be an assistant for a couple years, and then you're pretty much going to be a head strength coach for the rest of your career. Obviously, within football, that's a little bit of a different pathway where you were a head strength coach, at multiple times, and then now operating as an assistant strength coach. How's that experience been going from head to assistant? Not in a negative way whatsoever, but I mean,
Mhm.
obviously, there's different demands of the job, and operating under kind of a different, I guess, operation style, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. Honestly, I've kind of, no matter where I was or what job I had, I kind of treated them all the same. It was my job to work with whatever athlete I was working with at the time and make them the best possible person. Whether if that's in a head role, the only difference to me is, just kind of the level of, I won't say like instant respect or instant, kind of power that you kind of take on as a head strength coach. When you become assistant, you kind of lose a little bit of that because you don't want to ever overstep the head strength coach or, anyone who's above you in terms of like, coaching on the floor or just kind of general, I guess the mantra of being a head strength coach versus an assistant strength coach. So I guess that part is a little different, but anywhere I've gone, no matter what role I've in, I just try to coach the best of my ability and coach as hard as I can. So whether it's being an assistant or a strength coach, like I really haven't felt much different, to be honest with you. It's just kind of been, I just like to coach and, whatever aspect that may be, that's just kind of how it works out.
No doubt. And I love that mentality. And, I mean, it is true too, right? Like, I don't know how you guys break up position groups or how you separate, who you coach, but like, even if it's rotating groups throughout the, month or weeks, whatever it is, or if you just have your position groups, you're the head strength coach of that group for that day. Like that's how it operates. So ultimately there's still got to be a lot of head coach, kind of mentality to it. And I love that. I say the only benefit that I really always emphasize with being the assistant strength coach is not having to go to all the administrative meetings. I like that a lot better for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. But here at Syracuse, that's not really the case.
No joke.
I actually do. Like, we go to every single staff meeting that we have. So we're pretty involved in all that recruiting as well. Anytime we have official visits, we go to all the official visit dinners and all the different talks that we have to do. So we are pretty heavily involved in that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. Maybe they just didn't
Mhm.
like me then. Maybe I'm just finding it out right now. That might have been the
Yeah.
case.
Maybe that's what it was. But you were talking a second ago about how we kind of break it up. We don't necessarily have we don't work with just the bigs or just the skillers or just the mids. We kind of mix it up and we work with everybody. But the way that Coach Chad has us operate is he gives us the freedom to coach how we coach. We are a lot of times we are broken up into different groups, whether we're doing station work or things of that nature. And so when we're running that station, like you said, we are the head strength coach of that station at that time. Of course, doing it how we want to do it as a staff and how he wants things run. Maybe putting our little spin on it with how we approach it. But yeah, we are the head strength coach at that time of that area, and that's something that I can really appreciate because we're definitely not a staff where it's just one guy's coaching and everyone else is just kind of falling around in the background. We coach very hard, and we all kind of have our specific roles within the current organization that um, he truly allows us to be the coaches that we came here to be. If that kind of makes sense. Kind of within the program as well, as I've gotten to know Coach Chad a little bit better, I've actually been more and more involved in the actual programming that we do here. Last summer, I actually wrote the entire basically squat program for the summer, and I actually ran it, or I wrote it up for this entire spring, or I guess winter spring off season section as well, and that's going to continue into the summer as well. So although, like I said, I'm not the head strength coach, I do get some responsibilities that almost makes me feel like I'm the head strength coach of certain things at certain times.
No doubt. And that, I mean, to me, that's an awesome way to run a staff, right? Because there's a lot of ownership within that. And there's a lot of different things where, obviously you get to feel valued and feel like you're bringing as much as you can to the table. I love that he lets you guys be your own coach too, because, I've been forced to coach differently in the past, not within football, actually, in a different position. And, it sucks. Like you go in every day and you kind of got to put on this mask of like being a different person. And I'm like, I'm not this type of guy. I don't like coaching like this. And so it just drains you. And I remember that was probably the most burnt out I've ever felt in the field was
Hmm.
those times where I couldn't really be myself and I had to coach in a completely different way. And, I remember like interactions with athletes and I was like, this sucks. Like, you don't like this. I don't like this. Neither of us are getting better, and it's just not conducive to success for either of us. So I'm glad to hear that he lets you guys be yourselves too, because that's a huge part of the deal.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And I think we all have, similar but very different personalities, at least on this current staff. So it's how we operate is pretty cool. Everybody comes from different backgrounds, and I'm not necessarily a big like rah rah kind of guy when I'm coaching, but I'm not asked to be, and so I think that's pretty cool. Um, he doesn't want us to do something that we are not good at or comfortable with, or someone that we are not, just to bring fake juice or any of those kind of situations. So we just coach based on our personality, and I think that it works for us.
No doubt. And then, coaches who go on the opposite side of that always wonder why they have such high turnover on their staffs. And it's like, well, the answer's kind of right in front of you. So I'm glad
Yep,
to hear
yep,
that's the
for sure.
situation with you. I kind of want to go back to something that you mentioned where you said you basically emailed every program in the country, explained your situation, and, were able to see results from it, right? And you got positive, there's a net benefit to doing that. Like, I think it's cool. It's really cool that you mentioned doing that, right? Because it's tough to put yourself out there. It's always kind of, like those cold emails or cold calls can always be a little bit awkward at first, but I've never seen one not really provide something, right? Whether it's like
Hmm.
a nugget of information that you take for the rest of your career or just more experience, getting comfortable with talking to new coaches. I think that's a great kind of advice piece for younger coaches. What other advice would you have for some of the younger coaches who are listening to the podcast and are really trying to make a name for themselves in the field?
I think that you have to truly make sure that this is something that you want to invest in and truly do for the rest of your life, because it is not an easy profession to be in. It is hard to, at least in my experience, um, it is hard to climb the ladder and get to a point, at least financially, where I'm like, okay, this is going to be worth it or not. Because there's a lot of years, especially early on, that I was making very little to no money, and in order for me to fully commit to this, I'm like, I truly thought that my entire time I decided to be a strength coach, I was truly going to make it to the top level and coach, Power Five football. That was ultimately my dream, and I knew that I could get there if I just was able to stick it out long enough. So to make sure that this is truly that something you want to do and you're committed to do, and regardless of what happens, you're going to stick with it, because there's going to be a lot of ups and downs and a lot of bumps in the road. So if this is not something you truly love and truly have passion for, then you're going to reach a point where you're going to decide, okay, this is not for me, and maybe I should do something else.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And, ultimately, like, I have a lot of people. We have a great exercise science department here. I have a lot of people come over and ask to shadow or, just meet and kind of talk about strength and conditioning. And the main thing I tell them is you need to go to a lot of different places and you need to ask a lot of questions. And I said,
Hmm.
and people will be very open and honest with you. And you need to find out if this is the career you actually want to do or not. Right. Because if you do want to do it, it's going to be so rewarding. You're going to love it. You're going to get to wear a t-shirt and shorts to work every day and coach
Hmm.
athletes, watch them get better, watch free football, basketball games, whatever it is, and be completely fulfilled. But if it's not for you, you need to find out now, because you're going to
Hmm.
spend a lot of time struggling. There's going to be a lot of different times where you're going to be wondering, even if this is what you 100% want to do, is it actually what I want to do, right? And spending those nights questioning it and trying to work your way through that process. So I love that piece of advice, because ultimately, like, that's the biggest thing, and that's why you see so many people, in my opinion, of the young strength coaches drop out so early. I think once you hit a certain threshold, like you said, 10 years, I've been in it almost 10 years now too. Like, I don't know very many of my friends who are dropping out of strength and conditioning now, right? I
Right.
know
Yeah.
a lot who are dropping out very early on in the career. So, like, the ones who, enjoy it and know they truly love it can find success and find a lot of fulfillment out of it for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Kind of going back to the whole email thing. Whenever I sent over whatever it was 400 something emails, and the only responses that I was getting back were potential internship position, I was like, maybe this isn't something that's going to work out for me, because I was a GA. I had already done that. I was a head strength coach for a football team, Division 3, but still head strength coach of a football team, and that I was not able to get a look at any, Division 2 jobs or assistant jobs or anything of that nature. Um, so there was definitely a part of me at that point where, like, maybe this is something that is not for me. But then, ultimately I went to South Carolina, had a great experience there, and here we are now. So I'm definitely glad that I stuck it out.
For sure. And there's times where you just got to stick it out. There's times where you just got to say, you know what, I just kind of got to buck up and get through this. And then there's always kind of a light at the end of the tunnel. You said something too, which, I kind of want to shout out somebody who you introduced me to. So you said investing in yourself, okay, and it actually made me think of Jacob Malouf, right, who just accepted a GA position with us. Nick was, for our listeners who are, I think if they've been listening consistently, know I've been in the process of trying to hire GAs, and we put out an offer to one of Nick's interns over at Syracuse, and Jacob accepted the offer. I'm super stoked about it, but I want to shout him out because ultimately, we had a great level of conversations. We had a lot of success with, just his interview questions and everything. And I was like, this is our guy. Like, we need to get him. And our GA package, if I'm being 100% transparent, is not the best, right? We're not able to offer a tuition waiver. We're not able to do these things that I would really like to do. And I remember Jacob actually called another one of our former GAs, and basically said, "Hey, is this worth it or not?" And luckily that GA had our back, and said it's
Mhm.
absolutely worth it. But in a world where it's very easy to kind of take the road that's a little bit safer, I feel like Jacob made obviously I'm gonna be biased and say he made a great pick, right? But he's invested in himself, in my opinion, right? He's going to a situation where he may not get as much money, but he knows he's going to get as much experience as possible. So I'm glad you introduced me to him, but I think that's a
No
great
doubt.
example of investing in yourself, right? Because,
Yep, for sure.
ultimately he's going to get to run some seriously high level teams and he's going to get a lot of good experience. So I'm stoked for it.
Yeah, me too. I'm fired up for him. He's been with me for a year now, almost a year. So yeah, I'm fired up that he's getting the opportunity to go down there.
Yeah, and it's really cool too, and what I'm glad is like, sometimes you get coaches reach out to you and send you like, "Hey, this person's really good," right? And you interview them, and they may just not be a good fit. And I was like, "Shit, I got to get on a podcast with Nick." And if I don't like Jacob, we're gonna have
Yeah,
this slight
yeah,
awkward tension, right? Turns out he's the absolute man, and he gave me a great recommendation. So it's always good to know that, right? Not saying that I think you would send anybody who wouldn't fit this way, but it's kind of something I was like, all right. And then we got on the phone. I spent 15 minutes with him on the first phone interview. I was like, awesome. All right. Then I know this is not going to be nearly as awkward as I feared it would be.
yeah, yeah,
So,
for sure,
yeah.
for sure. No, that's
Well,
awesome.
you talked about, obviously growing in your art of coaching, are there any core principles or anything that you've learned over the, years, like that you really that stuck with you and you really take with you every job you go, like kind of your core structures or core principles that you have?
Um, so the biggest thing I've kind of already talked about it, but just like hard work and discipline, those are two things that are going to stick with me for the rest of my life because that's what got me to the point where I'm now. Um, so I mean, growing up, all I knew was hard work. That's how I excelled in athletics, and that's basically my core principle as a strength coach is that I may not be the best strength coach, or I may not be, the best at whatever topic that this coach wants me to talk about or wants me to present to the team or whatever the case may be. But I'm going to work really, really hard to make sure that if I don't know something, I'm going to learn it. Or if it's something that I'm very passionate about and I already know, I'm going to continue to work hard to make sure I'm even better at whatever that may be. And discipline kind of goes, right in with that. So hard work and discipline, those are definitely my two core principles that, are with me as a coach and really just my entire life in general. That's just kind of how I live and, that's how I do things.
I love that, man. And, the hard work piece for me is like, I've never worked harder and regretted it. Right. Like
Right.
I've never, had a problem or encountered something and then said, okay, let me do the background work to actually get better at this and then regretted it. Right. I've never felt like I've wasted time. So I love the hard work aspect of it, and I love that those are your core principles. It's awesome. I knew we'd get along, right? Obviously, because Patrick's been hyping you up, and Patrick only
Hmm.
likes cool people. But I really like your philosophies, and I like who you are as a coach, man. So I'm glad we kind of got to dive into this a little deeper. I've got one final question for you. Okay, most important one of the podcast, in my opinion. Favorite restaurant in Syracuse?
Oof. That's tough. Honestly, in terms of like just pizza and wings, Twin Trees.
Yep, there we
Yeah,
go.
I'm a big fan of Twin Trees. I actually have one that's less than a mile away from my apartment. So yeah, that's definitely up there for me.
That's awesome. Have you gotten a chance to check out Robbie T's Pizza yet?
I have not. I have
Okay,
not.
it's over in Jamesville. Robbie T's
Okay.
is awesome, man. And it's Robbie. Like Robbie answers the phone. Robbie's the one who hands you the pizza and everything. Like he's the guy. I highly recommend that. I actually have like that's the only restaurant I have saved in my phone where I have like the number actually is Robbie T's. So if I'm ever back in Syracuse, I'll be hitting you up and I'll be hitting Robbie up for sure.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's get some pizza.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, dude. Seriously, it's been great to get to know you. If anybody wants to reach out with any questions or kind of follow up with you, what would be the best way to either follow you on Instagram or reach out to you?
Yeah, Instagram or X, it's called now. Username is just coach and then underscore Raszeja, my last name, Razzeja. That'd definitely be the easiest way.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, dude. I really appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for having me.